person. Hi, welcome to the Scientist Sage Sangha and the topic of agency. I'm so glad to be back on track. People watching this after won't know, but we missed a couple of weeks due to some interesting times. And so the idea of agency is so provocative, and nowadays it's become this popular term. And so the first definition is that it's the ability to act as an effective agent for yourself. So it requires sort of getting your mind and body and emotions in enough balance that you can think clearly, you can advocate for yourself, and you can make choices that create positive outcomes. And you have the capacity to take continuous action towards them. So that's a bit of a long definition, but it's all of those things. It's got a lot of subtle pieces to it. It's not just about taking any kind of action, because lots of us can take all sorts of actions that don't do us much good. We're talking about continuous positive outcomes for ourselves. And this sounds like, yeah, that's a good idea. We do that every day. But it's much harder than people think. And it's interesting because there's a lot more interest in this idea now. Generally, it had been discussed in the idea that some people were prevented from having agency for themselves because of their circumstances. And it could be anything from poverty to location, to being the brunt of prejudice of some kind, all of those kinds of things. And those are all very true as well. But there's a bigger unfolding happening around the idea of agency. And it's really around our ability to execute. And we may, be admired and taken a plan and then start to do it, and then it gets really complicated and we get sort of taken off task by any number of things in our busy lives, and then we sort of fail to follow through, so we lack agency in that particular way. And that is really interesting now because a lot of people are talking about information overwhelm and decision fatigue, because they're just overwhelmed by all the possibilities. Not that they don't want to do something and that they absolutely can't do something, but they're overwhelmed by the possibilities. And I had a little picture in the email about somebody trying to jump over a bunch of hurdles. And sometimes those hurdles were things like support and different things like that. And it's the idea of sort of pushing willpower through it. And willpower doesn't always line up with agency. And so the idea of a different picture, rather than just, powering through it using force, is really coming to the fore more and more. And it is about how can I deal with my mental health, my thinking clearly, my emotional stability, all of those factors in my ability to actively be a good agent for myself. And the ideas are more about internal obstacles almost. And one of the things is that we become self-aware, being aware of past problems and future possible issues. And looking back at those things and being able to realistically take stock of where we're at and the things that had set us back. And it's interesting because one of the major things that 12-step does is get people to do an inventory. What kinds of things have you messed up? And, what are the character traits that you have that you want to develop in different ways? And what character traits do you act out in your life that are not serving you well? And so it's sort of that sort of idea, really being aware for ourselves, and the idea of knowing what we can do and what we can't do. Because in our society right now, there's lots of things like the sky is the limit and all of that sort of thinking. But it doesn't take into account what do we really want. And so that awareness about what do we really want, and the idea about some sort of higher purpose or higher intention, the values, we might have called them in times past, but it really is, what is the intention that I want to carry through in my life? And this has to be a lot clearer because we have so many distractions and possibilities and all those things. So this idea about intention, and from the people that are, for the people that are watching live with me as I record, and people that are going to watch later, I encourage you from this point to just take note of what are the things in your life that enhance your ability to take considered action that turns out as a positive forward flow, and what kinds of things inhibit that for you. And I know for myself, when I finally found out that I had an attention deficit disorder, it was so helpful because I wasn't just trying to push forward. And actually with ADD, it's often when you push hard like that, it grinds to a halt and almost acts like quicksand. And so trying harder wasn't the best way to go about it. And I did use that for a long time in my life, but it still took me a long time and difficulty to do things. And I got the idea that I couldn't do some things. And they were way more things than I thought. So in naivety, just I can do whatever I want, that was a sort of a setup for failure. What I found, though, persistence and concentration on something, I could usually find a way around it and move towards the goal that I wanted. And it looked very different than other people. It took longer. I couldn't take the same steps as other people, but that sort of enforced self-awareness, if I wanted to go anywhere with things, was so helpful, and is even today. As I go along with things, I recently had a broken leg, and I have this puppy with a broken leg, and that has to factor into what I can do in a day. And I don't like that. I don't want it. I want to go along and do the same things that I got to do before, and it was just not true. And so all sorts of things like that are coming up now, like economic issues, and with the pandemic, that certainly, changed things for a lot of us. We couldn't have the same kind of agency, and we saw that a lot of people got very upset about that they didn't get to do what they wanted to do when they wanted to. And so this idea of agency has to be married to this. What's the reality around me? I need to be aware of what the possibilities are and what my capabilities are. So that's why I encourage you to sort of just write some notes about that as we go along with this idea of agency. Where are my actions impaired? Where are they enhanced by things that I do? And so I can't necessarily do what I want to do exactly, but I truly believe my path that has taken me through all the science, and I've studied a lot of optimal performance kinds of things. I have a child that's a professional athlete, and I have another one that teaches athletes, and they use these performance enhancing ideas, and it improves agency. Whether my son is teaching somebody to ski, or my other kid is trying to, make a team, those things about enhancing abilities make the difference in being able to be agents for themselves. So that's really important idea to think about too. And it doesn't have to be something big about agency. One of the most significant things, now I don't know if I should really say this on recorded things, but I will anyway. One of the biggest things that I had to learn was to be able to get up in the morning and just take care of myself. Brush my teeth, brush my hair, put on clean clothes. And I didn't have a lot of support when I was younger. I think my mom wore it out on the first two children. So I was left to run a little wild. And I really, even as an adult today, have to exert some energy and intention there to be able to have agency to behave in that way, that other people just do sort of by normal rhythm. That's not one of the places that goes like that for me. But this whole idea, most of the things we don't say, okay, I can, if I have a true desire, there'll be a path open up. And more with this idea of agency is marrying to this idea, because if I have agency to act and force things through, I may be not going down the right path. And paying attention to where I am going to put my actions and why I'm putting them there, and what is the feeling in my body. There's a tremendous amount of energy involved in agency. And it's about gathering it together, gathering our emotions, gathering our intentions, gathering our ideas, our energy in our bodies, all of those things, gathering it together and putting it in one direction. And interestingly, as I went down a shamanic path, I ran into a teacher that had a very clear idea about this. And she literally calls it transmutation. And shamanic people have been using transmutation forever, whether it's making it rain, or in her case, she purifies water with practice of transmutation. And it's interesting because when you look at her formula for this, it looks like a performance coach's list. And this is a practice that has been around forever, literally about 100,000 years. And so it has union, which is just union with ourselves, being present with ourselves, being present with divinity or the energy in the universe. Love. Now, there's a lot of talk in the world about love what you do. And to have a passion for what you do energizes it, enables you to have agency to take the step you need to go forward. And concentration and focus are two separate things in this formula, because they have a little different flavor to them. And then the idea of harmony. So not against yourself or against the world. And so if I decided that I want to not tan when I go outside, now I use other things on my skin to change that. But I have to use things that are in harmony with me. Lots of times people get ill from using suntan lotion because it's not good for their body. If I want to drink a lot, that's not good for my particular body. And that doesn't get me into harmony with things. So we have to pay attention about that harmony of what we're doing with the rest of the world and our lives. And that's an age-old idea that if we're out of harmony, then it's going to fall apart eventually. So harmony, and then the last being imagination. And imagination is so important because if I can't imagine it, I can't bring other forces towards it. If you've ever thought about something that you wanted, and then starting to see things that might take you where you want to go. And that patience part of it is staying in the flow as opposed to trying to force everything. And this sounds like not agency, because agency is taking an action, but sometimes the action is contemplation, opening up. Sometimes it's meditation, sometimes it's imagination, just imagining the next steps. So these are a little different than a lot of people talk about with agency. But like I say, these ancient shamanic type formula are the same things as performance people. Little different idea because they're looking for a connection with divinity, the energy of the universe. But there are a lot of athletes actually that open up to things in that way as well. So that is really the idea shift. So I collect these sort of feelings and thoughts and patterns and pathways to start taking active agency for myself. And I would say that what happens if I just try and use my own meager resources, then a lot of those things it's like a long to-do list. Like I got to go to the dry cleaners and I got to make supper and I got to do all these other things, which kind of drains our real agency about how we want to live. And so this idea in the larger context of how is this fitting in my life? How is this fitting in the flow of my life? Is part of what I add to that list of all of those things in the formula, is really focusing. Can I take the concentration energy away from other things in my life and put it on this? Will that flow? So that is what I want to share about the idea. And just to have you just contemplate or meditate, whatever you feel most comfortable moving into, a particular action that you might want to take. And it can be really small, like one of the things that made a big difference in my life was rearranging my bathroom so that things would flow. And I would not have to use any energy to decide what was next. And so the first things that I need to do in the morning are all contained in that small room. And it flows well. So it could be something that simple. It could be something much bigger, like how do I want to live a life of service or harmony or peace? One of my guiding ideas is that I want to seek peace in my life and not avoid conflicts, but seek peace. It's sort of like Mother Teresa's idea. She said she would attend a peace rally, but not a war rally. So it's the idea of what am I focusing? So just anything that you want to work with this on. I used to run a mastery group with these specific principles involved in it. And people were surprised every time that the same principles could be applied to anything that they wanted to look at, whether it was getting rid of a difficult habit or developing a new positive habit, or, putting it towards something in their life, like dealing better with their finances or finding a new job or improving their relationship. Same set of principles. And when people ran through them, they found improvement. So let's take a breath and just hold, like I say, any particular one you want to try. I'd encourage you to just try and narrow it down to one thing, because if you try and go too broad, that decision fatigue and overwhelm comes in and you never make it over the first hurdle to take agency. And just take a breath. And you might close your eyes, you might have them open. You could jot notes if you want to in the contemplation, whatever way you'd like to do it. And just breathe really slowly. This is one of the things that brings your heart and your brain into coherence. And it opens up positive, hopeful chemicals in the brain. Just breathing a little more deeply than you might normally. And it shuts down the chemicals that feed our worry and indecision. It literally opens us up, our brains, to creativity. In this way, breathing slowly, thinking creatively, can bring in all sorts of unusual ideas that can apply to whatever it is that we're looking at. You might form an actual question, or you might just have images and ideas. A question might look like, How can I simplify my daily routine? Or it might be, how could I take action to make a specific relationship better? And again, shamans used this practice forever. They would take a question into a vision quest, or they would take a question and then they would physically or metaphorically journey on that question. They might go on a walkabout, or they might do a shamanic journey where they let go of their body and invite in guidance, all to the purpose of finding the right flow and the right actions. And the last method is one of breathing out confusion or conflict. And breathing in clarity, open-mindedness, calmness. You might create your own little mantra. Just the idea of slowing everything down, opening everything up. Okay. For those people watching this later, we'll close this up. For those that are attending live, feel free to stop and take notes or continue your contemplation for a few minutes. So thank you so much for attending the Wise Heart Wellness Scientist Sage Sangha. And thank you so much for your journey with me through these now 77 Sanghas. I couldn't believe it was that many until I had a tech breakdown that prevented me from running one. And so I am so grateful for people's attendance and encouragement and donations and ideas and your presence here with me. So thank you. I am with you. You are with me. Blessed be. Good night.